A specific critique of Wizard of Oz that I've come across a lot is that Judy Garland was either too old to play Dorothy, or that she overacts in the film. This seems to have been a gripe particularly held by fans of the original novel, in which Dorothy was about 9 or 10 years old, I think, certainly prepubescent. In fact, in the sequel movie Return to Oz, a child actor was cast, appropriately according to how she was depicted in the original novels, and this completely mismatched the casting of Judy Garland in the first Wizard of Oz film. The immediate production considerations that might explain the casting of Judy Garland in the first film are that she was already a rising star in the industry, she was clearly talented as an actress and a singer, but also, in the practical sense, an adult actor can be more relied on to shoot long hours and give a more nuanced acting performance, and at the very least, there are less legal problems when employing an adult actor. Although these factors were almost certainly considered in Judy's casting, my view is that the casting of an older actress with a mid to late teens look actually ends up serving very powerful and practical psychological purposes at the symbolic story level. Consider these two factors. Though Judy Garland is clearly a post-pubescent mid to late teen actress, there is virtually no sexuality in how her character is written, costumed or acted. Sure, the adult male companions rally around her and try to protect her, but it's done in an older family member kind of way, like they might be big brothers or uncles. Pretty much all of the dialogue for Dorothy could actually be performed by a child actor under the age of 10, and it wouldn't seem out of place. Dorothy doesn't talk about teenage issues or have any particular interest in boyfriends. Her specific affinity for the Scarecrow character could be taken as that, but he is the one that she first met on her Yellow Brick Road journey. I have another theory on why she particularly likes the Scarecrow character, and it's nothing to do with boyfriend stuff, but I'll present that much later in this video. I read somewhere that there is a stronger implication of the Scarecrow being a potential boyfriend for Dorothy in the Oz novels, that she might grow up and maybe marry him or something, but I don't find this to be the case in the film. In particular, Dorothy's life in Kansas seems very much that of a young child as well. She walks about the landscape instead of riding a bike. She doesn't seem to have any friends, though one would expect a teenage girl to have gone out seeking friends from nearby farms to hang out with. And what I'm getting at with all this is that Dorothy, though played by a late teenage Judy Garland, is written as an emotionally prepubescent character, and it is intended to be perceived that way by the audience. This framing is captured quite simply in the opening preface to the story, a dedication to the audience and fans of the original novel. And twice in this brief statement, the phrase young in heart is used. And the 40-year period since the novel was released is specified, which also draws to attention that fans of the novel will mostly be adults now at the time the movie came out in 1939, and so most of them would be middle-aged. In other words, the film is speaking to the child within the adult viewer. It's asking us to regress and identify with childhood emotion and childhood logic as we watch the film. And the film is indirectly asking us to think of Dorothy in this story as young in heart. In other words, to think of her as a young child in a body that is adult in appearance only. Thought of in this way, Judy Garland's performance is bang on the money. She isn't overacting, she is acting like a child whose world is full of rich, intense emotions, reacting deeply to situations and character interactions in a manner that a teenager wouldn't. She comes off as simple-minded, helpless, and lacking in basic life knowledge in accordance with the mind of a child. Children in the audience relate very strongly to this because they have less understanding about the typical emotional and intellectual lives of real teenagers, so it works for them. But there's another essential psychological function of casting an adult-looking actress as a prepubescent child. Wizard of Oz has some pretty dark scenes, most of them involving the Wicked Witch of the West.
But just try to stay out of my way. Just try. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too. You see that? That's how much longer you've got to be alive. And it isn't long, my pretty. It isn't long. I can't wait forever to get those shoes.
These scenes can be quite distressing for very young children, especially those around the ages of, say, between 3 and 6 years of age. And so casting an adult in the Dorothy role emotionally cushions the experience for the youngest viewers. If an actual child of, say, 9 years old or younger was acting in these scenes, I think the emotional disturbance factor would be doubled for the youngest viewers, and perhaps would make the film unwatchable for them. She also represents the emotional lives of much younger children as well, right down to toddlerhood. In this respect, the film expands beyond the childhood reading age of the novel and emotionally connects with toddlers who lack the concentration and intellect to read a book. These appeals to very young viewers come across in lots of ways. For one thing, the film is a musical. Singing and dancing wasn't part of the novel in any major way at all. Very young children love musical films, partially because the physicality of dancing and the exaggerated vocal and facial expressions involved in a song are easier to relate to on an instinctive level. It communicates the emotional lives of the characters and their relationships with each other without requiring child viewers to understand long dialogue sequences between characters. The lyrics of the songs are there, but the child doesn't really need to understand them on first viewing because the lyrics are mostly mirrored in the physicality of the scene. A lot of set elements here are oversized, making Dorothy look physically small, not just the Munchkins. There's huge plants and flowers. The hills in the background are so big that we can't even see the sky in most of the shots. The houses aren't oversized, but they look like massive mushrooms. And at the end of the scene, the cloud formations are like very tall mountains. The Munchkins themselves, being midgets, look like toddlers with semi-adult faces. They have oversized props such as big pocket watches or a massive lollipop. Their speeded up voices make them sound like children and toddlers, especially these ballet dancers.
I welcome you most regally. But we've got to verify it legally.
They have rosy red cheeks like babies and toddlers. A lot of them have curly tufts of hair like babies and toddlers. They hide like scared children, and Glinda the Good Witch is like a mother figure to them.
Come out, wherever you are, and meet the young lady who fell from a star.
There are baby ones as well, who seem to be about the same size as the supposedly adult ones. The giant props and backgrounds continue for much of the film. Huge plants, massive hills, a forest of big trees, the super tall Emerald City with its giant door and giant door knocker, the giant cliffs next to the city, and the vast expanse of hills seen from by the entrance. The people of the Emerald City are adult-sized, but the interior rooms and hallways are huge, and particularly they are tall. More oversized props like garden shear-sized scissors, the massive coat buttons on this fella, and there's the giant weapons they carry in the forest afterwards. The witch's castle is oversized and set against massive mountains. It also contains massive props and set details like the hourglass. Don't know where the hell they got a glass or crystal ball that big. Very tall doors, giant slabs making up the stone floors, huge fire pots. And after all this, there's the oversized gifts that are given by the wizard. On the one hand, these oversized visual elements communicate the emotional age of Dorothy by reducing her physical scale, and on the other hand, they provide visual emphasis for the youngest viewers so that their limited visual perception can take in exactly what is going on in terms of conceptual physicality, props, environments, and so on. This film makes itself very visually clear to children. Dorothy's childlike intellect is present throughout the movie in her over-emotional responses, her very simplistic dialogue, and her limited perception.
That way is a very nice way.
Who said that?
At the end of the Munchkin scene, Dorothy simplistically walks in a spiral pattern, following the yellow brick road, as if she doesn't understand that she could just save a little bit of legwork by just cutting across to where the road leaves the village. Sure, that's done for musicality, but it does make her appear extremely young in mind as well. She doesn't come up with any particularly intelligent problem-solving plans during the journey, because she's both young in heart and young in mind. And finally, this childlike, even baby-like emotional and intellectual reality is present in Dorothy's companions. They all have crying moments, crying like babies, despite being played by grown-up men. They're all intellectually childlike, and they all are near enough scared of their own shadow like Dorothy is. In the novel, they were a lot tougher and more capable. For example, Tin Man and the Lion fight and kill monstrous enemies far scarier than anything that's shown in the movie. The lion is so baby-like in the film that he wipes his tears on his tail and plays with his tail generally as if he's sucking his thumb. The tail has a sort of involuntary life of its own, which is funny because it kind of symbolises his lack of emotional self-control.
What happened?
Somebody pulled my tail.
You did it yourself.
He even gets a ribbon put in his hair like he's a little girl. And of course, all three of these characters are externalised elements of Dorothy's own emotional and intellectual journey throughout the story anyway. But just to sum up, by comparison, the audience response to this multi-age framing of the Dorothy character in The Wizard of Oz, the sequel movie Return to Oz does not use the multi-age framing. In that film, the character is roughly 8 to 10 years old. I did mention this earlier. And while Return to Oz is argued by some as being the better film, and I am a big fan of it personally, but for completely different reasons, I love both movies, the film did not hold the mass appeal to all ages that the first film did. It wasn't nearly as financially successful and has mostly disappeared down the public memory hole. It does have its dedicated fans, but it was too scary for the youngest kids, and probably the adults couldn't identify as much with the very young actress in the film either. So that shows just how clever Wizard of Oz is in terms of the casting of Judy Garland. You've been listening to Rob Ager, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this.